All right, so today we'll talk about cellular respiration. So, cellular respiration uses the food that we eat or the food that plants or autotrophs create, and it produces energy. So it's a process in which organisms are able to create energy, so we can live, we can function, we can move, that kind of stuff. And so, the reason why the reason why autotrophs need to produce sugar and oxygen is so that they can undergo cellular respiration. And so what you'll notice is that the products of photosynthesis, or what's producing photosynthesis, is sugar and oxygen. So we take the plants make their own sugar and oxygen. Heterotrophs, though, they eat sugar and then they breathe in oxygen, and what they produce is carbon dioxide and water. Those are byproducts. But the main thing is energy in the form of ATP. So the whole point for cellular respiration is to create ATP. We have carbon dioxide and water. That's like we call those byproducts. But the main reason we do cellular respiration is to create energy. So this is the reactants, and then this side is the products. Okay. All right. So how does cellular respiration occur? Where does it occur? It occurs in the mitochondria. That's where the energy is produced. And so for one sugar molecule, we actually can produce 36 molecules of ATP. So that's pretty good. It's a 1 to 36 ratio. What is the relationship? Well, it's almost like a cycle when it comes to autotrophs. So this is only for autotrophs, right? So for autotrophs, they take in, you have sunlight plus carbon dioxide plus water, and from that you create glucose and oxygen. So this is photosynthesis, right? And then what they do is they take these. And so actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on this side. They take the glucose and oxygen, and they produce, in cellular respiration, they produce carbon dioxide plus water plus ATP, energy. The energy we use to live and that kind of stuff. But what is left over is the CO2, and that gets used. So this is cellular respiration. So it almost looks like it's a cycle, right? So here are the reactants and products of cellular respiration, and here are the reactants and products of photosynthesis. And if you look, that's kind of what happens, right? Here in cell respiration. So into the mitochondria comes glucose and oxygen. Out comes energy in the form of ATP, and then CO2 and water. Well, that CO2 and water gets reused in photosynthesis, where that goes in along with light energy, and then you produce oxygen and glucose. Okay, so let's talk about cellular respiration. So kind of like photosynthesis. Remember, photosynthesis has two parts. It had the light reaction and then the Calvin cycle. There's 3 steps. One is glycolysis, which occurs outside the mitochondria, the Krebs cycle, which is inside the mitochondria, and then electron transfer chain, which occurs inside the mitochondria along the membrane. And this, the electron transfer chain produces most of the ATP. So here is, now you don't need to know these parts, but what you do need to know is that the first step here, this is called glycolysis, and it happens outside the mitochondria. The citric acid cycle is also known as the Krebs cycle. And then here's the they call it oxidative phosphorylation, but we consider it as the electron transport. chain. So the most amount of ATP occurs here. Remember, the whole goal of this is to get ATP, right? So here's step 1. Step 2 is the Krebs cycle. Step 3 is the electron transport chain. All right, so let's talk about, so sometimes we don't have enough oxygen. For example, when we're working out or running, right? Like, let's say you run out of oxygen or you hold your breath, and it's not as though you completely die or stop moving. You can still move when you hold your breath, but at those points you're not taking in any oxygen, right? And so your body actually has two pathways. One pathway is aerobic respiration. And that's occur when you have oxygen. This is the best way you produce the most ATP. But let's say you're breathing in oxygen and you can't get enough energy, like you need more energy. Well, there's a second pathway that can occur. Your body can do, and that's called anaerobic respiration. That's without oxygen, and that produces little ATP, but it doesn't need oxygen, which is kind of nice. So we're going to talk about anaerobic respiration now. So here we have aerobic respiration. So notice you produce energy, right, ATP, but you have oxygen. So this is the best way. Let's say, though, you don't have any oxygen, anaerobic. So there's no oxygen. Notice in the reactor there's no oxygen. So you still get energy, but instead of producing water, the water actually turns into some type of alcohol or acid. So there's two types of anaerobic respiration that you need to know. One is called alcoholic fermentation, that we'll talk about here. And so we use it to make beer, pickled food, kimchi, anything that's fermented. We can use alcohol. It's called alcoholic fermentation, and so this occurs. This can occur in places where there's not oxygen. So that's how we make alcohol. Another type of fermentation is called lactic acid fermentation. And so this occurs when your muscles don't have access to oxygen. And so what happens is it can cause your muscles to be sore, and that's what we call lactic acid. So there's two types of anaerobic respiration. One's called alcoholic fermentation. The other one is lactic acid fermentation.